The crystalline throne room shimmered like a living constellation, its walls made of star glass that caught the ambient light from the floating orbs above and refracted it into dancing rivers of color. Beneath that haunting glow stood Captain Elias Rourke, scarred, unshaven, and still dressed in the scorched armor of a battlefield only hours behind him. Dust clung to his boots. Blood, some of it his own, was caked into the seams of his worn coat, and a long burn traced his jaw, where a plasma bolt had nearly ended his legend. Yet he stood tall, his spine iron straight, his expression unreadable, as he faced the most powerful being in this quadrant of the galaxy. Queen Ashelin Sirai sat upon a throne that seemed grown, not built, its translucent spires curving around her like the arms of an ancient celestial entity. Her presence filled the chamber, not through volume, but through sheer gravity of existence. She was tall, statuesque, her skin a living canvas of shifting color, opalescent one moment, lavender blue the next, like the reflection of nebulae on liquid silver. Her eyes held centuries, maybe millennia, behind them. And when they fixed on Elias, the room went still. "You stand before us, Elias Rourke," her voice rang out, both melodic and dangerous, having delivered what no fleet, no treaty, no prophecy could accomplish: peace, after 100 years of blood. She rose from the throne, each step graceful and deliberate, her robes catching the light as though stitched with stardust. "As is our custom in ancient law, you shall be granted 3 wishes. Choose wisely." Gasps echoed among the alien courtiers, feathered beings, insectal diplomats, crystalline envoys, all gathered in curiosity and tension. No human had ever stood here. No outsider had ever been offered such a gift. Elias's jaw clenched slightly. He took a breath that tasted of incense and distant stars, and then stepped forward. "My first wish," he said, his voice steady, gravel rough but firm, "is to share your bed tonight." For a moment, time fractured. A shudder ran through the court like a solar quake. Some beings recoiled. Others blinked in what could only be interpreted as scandalized fascination. Advisors stirred uncomfortably, their tendrils fluttering with silent outrage. One of the Queen's elite guards moved, subtly but swiftly, toward the hilt of his plasma spear. But Elias didn't move. His gaze didn't waver. He had stood face to face with death more times than he could count. This was no different. Queen Ashelin's expression didn't change, no flush of rage, no twitch of surprise. Her eyes simply narrowed. The silence stretched, pulled taut as a neutron wire. When she finally spoke, her voice had gone cold. "Crystalline, you would use your first wish for that?" Her tone made the room tremble. "Yes," he said, unblinking. "I would." Nithran law was absolute. A royal wish, once given, could not be denied, not without unraveling the very codes that held their empire together. And they all knew it. Ashelin stared at him for a moment longer, and something unreadable flickered behind her eyes. Without breaking gaze, she lifted her hand and gestured. "So be it. Escort the captain to my sanctum." The Queen turned her. Back on the gasping assembly, walking from the chamber with robes that flowed like liquid space. Elias followed without hesitation, not to a cell, not to a death sentence, but to a private sanctum no outsider had ever entered. Behind them, the court erupted in whispers, and in their wake, the fabric of tradition began to tear. Asterisk, the Queen's private sanctum was nothing like the grand throne room. It was smaller, quieter, and strangely intimate, a chamber of warm shadows and subtle grace. Walls of deep violet crystal curved inward, pulsing softly with bioluminescent patterns that responded to breath and movement. The air smelled of strange flowers, sweet and faintly electric, like ozone after a storm. Floating orbs of light hovered above a sunken pool of liquid starlight, casting reflections across the smooth obsidian floor. In the center of it all stood a bed carved from a single arc of polished, moonstone-like material. Draped in silken fabrics that shimmered like the night sky, Elias Rourke stood just inside the threshold. Silent. Queen Ashelin Sirai had not spoken since they'd left the throne room. Her steps had been silent, her robes whispering against the crystalline floors. She didn't look at him now, her back straight as she stood by a pane of glass that overlooked the nebula gardens far below. The palace. Her hands rested lightly on the window frame, long fingers adorned with rings that pulsed with living energy. "You've caused a fracture in centuries of order," she said finally, her voice no longer cold, but low, even. "You've upended expectation, made mockery of diplomacy." "I didn't make a mockery," Elias replied calmly. "I made a wish." Ashelin turned slowly to face him. In this softer light, without her crown or guards or ceremonial distance, she looked less divine and more real. Her features were impossibly perfect, but there was something human in the tight line of her mouth, the question in her eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Why choose this of all things? You could have asked for a fleet, a planet, immortality." Elias stepped closer, each word deliberate. "Because in every strategy meeting, every negotiation, every glance across a war map, I saw something behind your eyes. You didn't just want to win. You wanted to be understood, seen." She didn't reply right away. Her expression remained unreadable, but her aura subtle, almost imperceptible to most flared around her. A crown of light, invisible to the naked eye, flinched like a flame in wind. "You presume much." "Maybe," Elias said, his voice quieter now, "but I know what loneliness looks like. I wore it for years before this war gave me purpose." Again, Ashelin studied him as if seeing him anew. Then she crossed the space between them, slowly, deliberately. Her hand rose, not in anger, not in dismissal, but to press gently to the side of his face. Her palm was cool at first, then warm, then hot with some kind of radiant energy that wasn't heat, wasn't pain, just presence. Elias didn't flinch. "In my culture," she said, her voice just above a whisper, "physical union is more than act, it's connection, memory, thought, souls brushing." "I'm not afraid of that," Elias said. "You should be," she replied. And yet she didn't pull her hand away. She stepped even closer until her breath brushed his jaw. Her other hand came up, resting just above his chest, fingers lightly tracing the edge of a burned scar. "I have been alive for over 2 centuries. I have watched lovers age and die while I remained unchanged. I've ruled through uprisings, betrayals, assassinations, but never once have I allowed myself the selfishness of intimacy." Elias placed his hand over hers. "Then maybe it's time." A breath passed between them. And then, like the release of a dam, she kissed him. It was not gentle. It was fire and ice, ancient longing and raw defiance, the breaking of barriers both psychic and emotional. Energy crackled around them, literal sparks dancing across his skin where her hands touched. Bare flesh. For the first time in his life, Elias felt another person's emotions in full, her memories of star systems in bloom, her despair in moonlit solitude, her triumphs and regrets braided together like rivers of color. His mind teetered on the edge. Overwhelmed, but he held on. He kissed her back. Their bodies moved together, as if answering some unspoken language, one older than war or diplomacy. When she guided him to the bed, there was no dominance, no power game, only mutual surrender. Layers of silk fell away. Their forms met, not as ruler and subject, not as victor and reward, but as two beings desperate to feel something real in a galaxy that had burned so much away. Time stretched. Words vanished. Only sensation remained, touch, breath, thought, memory, soul. And when it was over, when she lay with her head against his chest, and her breath slowed. She whispered words that echoed deeper than their shared silence. Changed something I cannot undo. Elias brushed his fingers through her luminous hair, eyes on the ceiling as nebulae swirled above them. Good, he said. That was the point. Outside, the court stirred in scandal. But in this quiet chamber, history had already turned. The throne room was colder the second time Elias entered it, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. The crystalline walls no longer danced with the carefree shimmer of diplomacy, but instead seemed taut with restrained tension, refracting the light in sharp, narrow bands. Whispers followed him like ghosts. Advisors spoke behind folded tendrils, emissaries exchanged nervous glances, and the guards who had once looked past him now kept their eyes locked, uncertain whether to salute him or incinerate him. Queen Ashlyn. Sarai sat upon her throne again, just as poised, just as radiant, but not unchanged. Her gaze found him the moment he stepped through the archway, and in that glance was a silent current, a thread of shared truth no one else in the room could feel. She gave no visible sign, no twitch or smile, but through the invisible tether. Formed the night before, Elias felt her caution, her pride, and underneath it all, curiosity. Captain Elias Rourke, she intoned, her voice once again wrapped in the echo of imperial authority. You stand before the court once more. You have 2 wishes remaining. Gasps stirred again, not from her statement, but from the fact she'd said it at all. She was acknowledging the validity of the first wish, legitimizing what should have been whispered away and buried beneath ceremonial discretion. But Ashlyn had never been one to retreat from a storm. And Elias, as always, met her in its heart. He stepped forward to the center of the room, boots clicking against the polished crystal floor. Every eye in the galaxy seemed fixed on him, representatives from 50 systems, nobles draped in shimmering robes, warlords still nursing the bruises of defeat. I make my second wish, he said, voice clear and deliberate. For 1 standard year, I wish to serve as your personal advisor, with full access to imperial strategy, planning, and council sessions. The silence shattered. Alien voices broke into discordant chaos, some vocal, others harmonic, some producing frequencies only half the room could hear. An ambassador from the Mauritian Continuum let out a shrill series of pulses. A golden-skinned noblewoman from Sector Illyra collapsed into a fit of laughter that quickly turned to weeping. Chancellor Var Drevon, Ashlyn's chief political advisor, stepped forward, his bony frame shrouded in obsidian silk, his facial ridges darkening with fury. Your Majesty, Drevon said, tone brittle, this is an affront to every principle upon which our empire stands. An outsider advising on matters of state? It is beyond reckless, it is unprecedented. Ashlyn did not move. So was the war, she said. So was its ending. Drevon's lips thinned to a pale slash. We have spent centuries cultivating a diplomatic equilibrium. The introduction of foreign thought into our sovereign command ended. That war, Elias interrupted. Gasps. Again, he didn't shout, didn't provoke. He merely looked at Drevon with the same steady fire that had pushed back battlefronts, that had forced empires to reconsider their tactics. You speak of principles, an equilibrium. I've walked among the starving miners on Talar 5. I've seen the orphan camps on Varelia. Equilibrium means nothing to the dying. Drevon opened his mouth, but Ashlyn lifted one hand. That single gesture silenced the court. Enough, she said softly, but it carried like thunder. She rose, every inch the sovereign being, but through their psychic tether, Elias felt her conflicted but intrigued, torn between the path of law and the instinct to follow something new. Captain Rourke, she said slowly, do you understand what this means? What access to my counsels implies? I do, Elias replied, and I understand what your empire needs. Fresh eyes. unfiltered truth. Someone who sees not just the stars on the map, but the people beneath them. There was a beat of stillness. And then, with terrifying grace, Ashlyn descended the steps of her throne. Her gaze never left Elias's face, even as the court held its breath in collective disbelief. Then your second wish is granted, she declared. The room exploded. Voices, flares of emotion, waves of protest and awe filled the chamber. But Elias only heard her unspoken words, rushing against his consciousness like fingers on skin. You could have left. Could have taken power, wealth, freedom. He answered with a thought of his own. I stayed. Because I see you. And somewhere deep within her, a wall began to crack. Not in fear, but in possibility. The moons of Nithra hung low and luminous over the capital, their twin reflections mirrored in the polished obsidian tiles of the sky terrace. The palace was alive with light and music, hosting the Festival of Unification, a celebration that only a month ago would have felt like a funeral. In disguise, honoring the end of a war no one believed would truly conclude. Now it was triumph. But uneasy. Elias stood at the edge of the gathering, a chalice of shimmering star wine in hand, dressed in formal black attire fitted with the silver insignia of his newly appointed role, Imperial Strategos. He hated the fit of it. Too clean. Too ceremonial. But he endured it because tonight wasn't about comfort. It was about visibility. The court needed to see him beside Ashlyn. The galaxy needed to understand that his presence was not fleeting. It was the new order. Ashlyn stood in the center of a halo of admirers and sycophants, resplendent in a gown of violet lightweave that moved like flowing plasma. Her silver hair was adorned with filaments of living crystal that pulsed gently in time with her thoughts. But even from across the terrace, Elias could feel her unease through their bond. The smiles she offered were rehearsed. Her aura was controlled, too controlled, like a dam barely holding back a flood. And then it happened. A ripple. Not sound. Not sight. Instinct. The second Elias felt the flicker in the queen's aura, something cold and wrong, he moved. He dropped the chalice. The sound of its shattering drew only momentary attention before he collided with Ashlyn, throwing her bodily to the floor as a crack of blue-white. Energy tore through the air where she had been standing. Screams erupted. Panic bloomed. Crystalline decorations shattered. Courtiers scattered in waves of silk and feathers and flashing scales. Another blast struck the sculpture behind him, vaporizing it into molten droplets. Guards rushed in, weapons drawn, but Elias had already pulled his concealed pulse pistol and was scanning the upper balconies. There! Someone shouted. A cloaked figure leapt from an archway above, landing with inhuman grace before raising a serrated disruptor blade. Elias stepped forward, firing twice, one bolt grazing the attacker's arm, the other missing as the figure dodged with impossible speed. Guards encircled the terrace, finally cornering the would-be assassin near the ceremonial plinth. As the veil of the cloak burned away, the attacker was revealed, a Nithran noble, high-born by the sigils etched into his skin. Lord Valix of House Kref, a name Elias recognized from whispered opposition. Felix's skin shimmered with dark rage. His voice warped with madness. She is sacred. Our bloodline must remain pure. You think you pollute her with your weakness. Ashlyn, already rising to her feet, her gown torn at the shoulder, her eyes burning with psychic fury, stepped between Valix and Elias. You dare raise a weapon against your sovereign? She said, her voice vibrating with raw power. I dare. Protect our future from you. Valix snarled, drawing on psychic energy so chaotic it made the air scream. Elias moved to shield her again. But this time, Ashlyn raised her hand, and the force that erupted from her palm shattered the disruptor blade and slammed Valix against the wall with bone-breaking force. Guards swarmed him. He collapsed, unconscious, twitching. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ashelin's breathing was ragged. Elias, his pulse still hammering, reached for her, but she turned sharply and strode from the terrace without a word. He followed her through winding halls, past stunned servants and silent guards, until they reached her private chambers. The moment the doors sealed, she spun to face him, and the mask she wore in public shattered. "I could have died," she said, her voice shaking not with fear, but with fury. "In my own palace, during a night meant to unite my people." "But you didn't," Elias replied, stepping closer. "Because I was there. You shouldn't have had to be." Her fists clenched at her sides, light pulsing beneath her. "Skin. They'll try again. You felt it. This wasn't a lone fanatic. There are factions, old houses, the Chancellor. They fear what we've become." "I don't care what they fear," he said. "Let them try. I'll be here. Every time." Her eyes, those impossibly deep, ancient eyes, glittered now with something other than rage. They shimmered with heartbreak. "You make this sound easy," she whispered, "but loving me is a risk. You saw tonight, just being near me puts your life in danger." Elias reached out and took her face in his hands, gently, reverently. "You think war was safer? I've lived with death, fought it, slept beside it. This," he pressed his forehead to hers, "this is worth dying for." Something in her cracked. The dam gave way. She kissed him, fierce and trembling, as if needing to prove to herself that he was real, that he was still warm. And whole and alive, their clothes fell away like unwanted armor. Their connection deepened beyond the physical, flaring open into psychic resonance. Elias felt everything, her fear, her shame, her desire, her pain. And she felt him, raw and whole, and offering everything he had. They came together not just in body, but in soul, the psychic tether flaring into something deeper, something unbreakable. And when at last they lay tangled in silence, her hair draped across his chest like moonlight, she whispered, "They want you gone. I know. They'll demand you use your third wish to leave. For the Empire. For safety." He looked down at her, brushing silver strands from her cheek. "They can demand all they want." She lifted her head, eyes full of fragile, fierce hope. "You're not going to leave, are you?" He kissed her gently. "Never." And in that moment, she knew. The third wish would change the galaxy. The stars over Nithra blinked in silence, indifferent to the storm stirring beneath them. Inside the palace, the tension had turned brittle. Courtiers moved like shadows. Behind translucent walls, their eyes sharp with suspicion, their mouths speaking in coded whispers. The halls that once welcomed Elias with reluctant curiosity now watched him with sharpened nerves. 3 days remained before his second wish expired. 3 days before the galaxy would hear what his final desire would be. The Queen hadn't spoken of it, not directly, not with words. But Elias felt her fear coil like smoke beneath her composed surface. Through their bond, he tasted the questions that haunted her. Will he stay? Will he leave? Will he retreat into the safety of his own people to avoid the consequences we've summoned together? She had not asked him, and he had not told her. Not yet. Tonight, the throne room swelled with life. It was filled to the edges with diplomats, nobles, generals, and spectators from beyond Nithran space. Even a delegation from Earth's United Command had arrived, their flag an unfamiliar presence in the sea of alien color. The court had demanded transparency, tradition, and spectacle, and they would have it. Queen Ashelin Serai sat on her crystalline throne, tall and still as a mountain of light, wrapped in ceremonial robes that whispered of galaxies and flame. Her eyes did not betray emotion, but Elias felt the quick flutter of uncertainty within her as he stepped into the chamber. He walked to the center of the hall with deliberate calm, his stride sure, his shoulders squared. He wore a simpler uniform today, coal-black, high-collared, no medals. Just him. A man standing before gods. The chamber, silenced. Queen Ashlin's voice rang out, its regal tone wrapping around every ear and mind like a silken chain. Captain Elias Rourke, you have fulfilled your duties to this empire beyond measure. You have made 2 wishes. You stand now before your court, your sovereign, and your galaxy. Your final wish awaits. Speak, and it shall be honored. 1,000 breaths caught. 1,000 expectations bristled. Elias inhaled slowly, then lifted his chin and spoke. My 3rd wish is not for return passage to Earth, he began, his voice even, firm. Nor for wealth, nor for sanctuary, nor for power. He turned slowly, letting his gaze sweep across the chamber, letting them all see the truth in his eyes. I ask for the right to stand beside Queen Ashlyn Sarai, not as a guest, not as a temporary consort, but as her equal, her life-bonded mate, her co-ruler, her partner in all things. The silence was absolute, no whispers, no protests. Not at first. Only raw, shocked stillness. And then outrage. The chamber exploded in sound. A chorus of voices rose in disbelief, in scandal, in horror. Tentacled nobles shouted in multiple tones at once. Winged diplomats thrashed their limbs in protest. The Earth delegation froze, mouths agape. Chancellor Dreven's face had turned the color of oxidized iron, his breath sharp and broken. Ashlyn remained seated. Only her eyes moved to Elias. Wide, luminous, alive. You are asking us, she said, slowly rising from her throne, to change laws that have governed our empire for 10,000 years. You are asking us to allow a human into the sovereign lineage. You would rewrite our future. Elias met her gaze, unblinking. No, I'm asking you to choose love over tradition, to choose truth over fear. We both know this bond we share is real, powerful, and worth fighting for. Their connection sparked like a current. Every word he spoke resonated within her, not just in thought, but in memory, in feeling. The night she had almost died, the mornings they had shared, the laughter stolen between negotiations, the ache of his absence during meetings she once faced alone. I'm asking you, he said softly now, to believe we can build something better together. The Queen's voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried like thunder. Then let it be recorded that Elias Rourke's 3rd and final wish is granted. Gasps, cries, cracks in glass from the sudden release of tension in the chamber. She descended the stairs slowly, robes billowing, and took his hand in hers. Let the law be amended, she said, louder now. Let the histories be rewritten. Let the stars bear witness. In that moment, as their fingers intertwined and light pooled around them in cascading waves of psychic resonance, the court saw not a queen and a soldier, not an empress and a trespasser. They saw future, and the old world, one of fear and isolation, began to break. The coronation that followed 6 months later shattered every precedent. Ashlyn and Elias stood side by side beneath a celestial arch woven of living vines and burning gems. Representatives from over 100 species attended. Even the Earth delegation, once skeptical, knelt in respect as Elias was crowned, not as an outsider, but as co-sovereign of the Nitheran Dominion. That night, beneath the twin moons of Nithera, in a garden lit by floating blossoms and psychically tuned chimes, they were married. As they danced, hand in hand, Ashlyn leaned close to his ear and whispered, "You never even asked for power." Elias smiled. "Didn't have to." "And what did you get?" He kissed her gently, his hand resting over her heart. Everything. The stars above them flared brighter, as if the galaxy itself had blinked, and awakened into something new. Asterisk. The first signs of the coming storm arrived, not from Nithra, but from the void beyond. A string of emergency transmissions burst into the Palace Command Center like a wave of fire. 3 fringe systems, Kepler Station, Vale Prime, and the Rim Outpost at Sector 18, were under simultaneous assault. Hostile fleets were emerging from the Andorian Nebula, using stealth jump tech, far beyond what anyone believed those rogue species possessed. The attacks were coordinated, fast, and strategic, not raids. Not chaos. War. Within minutes, the palace's great command spire came alive. Crystalline data panels flickered with schematics and battlefield feeds. Alarm sigils burned above every strategic projection. Officers and aides rushed to battle stations, their minds already sharpening for the impossible. In the heart of it all stood Elias Rourke and Queen Ashlyn Sarai back to back. Their psychic bond thrummed like a star core under pressure. Together, they parsed data at speeds no separate minds could match. She processed the massive tide of information from across sectors. He identified movement patterns, formation anomalies, and power fluxes no AI could spot. His intuition, her clarity. His boldness, her restraint. "We're being tested," Elias said, eyes narrowed at the fleet readouts. "This isn't about conquest. It's about seeing how fast we fall apart. Under pressure." "They think our political shift made us vulnerable," Ashlyn murmured. "They expect chaos, weakness. They're about to be disappointed." Commander Kess, a luminous, crystalline being with a body of pulsing light fractals, leaned forward from the war table, her voice tight. "Kepler stations requesting immediate support. Their shields are holding, but barely. The fleet split. We can't reinforce all 3 sectors at once." "Which is exactly what they want," Elias muttered. His mind surged with possibility. Sector 12 is the bait. Their forces are overstretched there, too clean. It's a feint. Ashlyn caught the same pattern. Kepler is the real target. If we pull resources from there, they'll collapse. And we don't pull. We collapse their feint instead, Elias said. Redirect fleet Vicos to Sector 18 to simulate reinforcement, just enough to scare them into committing. Then hit their actual main force with the 7th and 9th fleets at Kepler, full burn. She nodded, eyes blazing. Deploy it immediately. Orders flew out like lightning. Within minutes, the trap was set, and within 6 hours, the enemy was broken. Their fleets buckled under the unexpected counterstrike. The coalition commanders, united only in ambition, not trust, fractured when their illusion of dominance shattered. By dawn, the last rogue vessel disappeared into the void, limping back toward the nebula's edge. The command center fell quiet, the hum of war machines lowering to a resting purr. For the first time in weeks, the court looked at Elias with something more than suspicion. They looked at him with respect. Chancellor Drevin himself approached, wings folded in tight control, his expression unreadable. "The efficiency of your union," he said slowly, "has proven ... advantageous. Perhaps there is merit in unconventional alliances." It wasn't an apology, but it was a crack in the wall. Later, beneath the glass arches of the observation deck, Ashlyn stood with Elias, watching the twin moons rise over the capital. Her gown shimmered softly in the low light, but her bare feet made her feel more human than divine. "The year is over," she said quietly. "I know. Your term as my advisor is complete." He glanced down at her. "And our marriage?" Her lips twitched into a tired smile. "Still binding, still scandalous, and still real." She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. The court expects you to return to Earth. Some are even placing bets on where you'll exile yourself. They think this was all just a war-born affair. And what do you think? She looked up at him then, her eyes glowing in the moonlight. I think you're about to surprise me again. The next morning, the great throne room was filled beyond capacity. Even the human delegation had returned, sitting on raised platforms with stoic silence. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the space in anticipation. Queen Ashelin rose, her robes rich with power and tradition. Captain Elias Rourke, she said, though everyone knew he was no longer just that. You have completed your service. Your final wish has been fulfilled. You have stood as my equal. The time has come to declare your intentions. The Empire awaits your decision. Elias stepped forward. I made 3 wishes, he began, his voice clear and steady. To share your bed, to serve at your side, and to claim your heart as mine. Gasps stirred like wind through grass. He continued. But those were not ends. They were beginnings. And now, with your court and the galaxy watching, I make a 4th wish unspoken, unbound by law. A promise. Ashelin's breath hitched. I will not leave, not because I am bound, not because I am rewarded, but because I choose to stay with you for as long as you'll have me. The light in her eyes shimmered, then broke like starlight as she stepped down from her throne. No crown, no decree, just a woman walking toward the man she loved, and before all of them, before gods and rebels and diplomats, she kissed and got no power in the room dared stop it. Later that night, in the quiet of her garden, where floating blossoms drifted lazily, on psychic wings and the scent of moonfruit lingered in the air, Ashelin took his hand and placed it gently over her stomach. I haven't told anyone, she whispered. Elias's heart stopped, but he already knew. Her voice trembled. Psychic resonance between bounded minds? It wasn't supposed to create life, not across species. But the bond between us, it changed something. It made something. A single tear slipped down her cheek. I'm carrying our child. Elias's hand curled protectively over hers, over the future already blooming within her. A child born of war and peace, of defiance and love. A symbol of 2 worlds refusing to be separate any longer. He leaned down and kissed her belly, his voice low and steady. And we've already changed the stars. And somewhere above them, the galaxy turned. Not just into a new chapter, but a new age, the end.